She's fine now, though she gave me a scare crying so hard when she saw Aquabata. Maisie raised an eyebrow as he sat on a wooden stool. Again? That's odd. Precious used to love Aquabata. I know, Mabel sighed, concern creeping into her voice. Lately, she just cries and cries whenever Aquabata comes near. The sun peeped over the tall palm trees that morning in Nkano, Enugu State, Nigeria. The rooster had crowed at dawn, and a soft golden light filled the small village. Mabel stepped out of her house with a broom made of dry palm fronds, ready to sweep the red dust from her front porch. Her little baby girl, Precious, was strapped to her back with a colorful wrapper. Precious cooed softly as her mother hummed an Igbo lullaby. It was a peaceful start to what Mabel thought would be an ordinary day. Next door, the gate of the neighboring compound creaked open. Out stepped Aquabata, Mabel's best friend and neighbor. Aquabata was carrying a basket of freshly harvested ugu leaves, pumpkin leaves, from her garden. She had a bright smile on her face as she called out, "Good morning, Mabel. Kedu ka ị mere?" which means "How are you" in Igbo language. Mabel paused her sweeping and waved cheerfully. "Good morning, my sister. I am fine, oh. How was your night?" she replied. Aquabata walked over to the low fence that separated their yards. They often met there each morning to chat and share plans for the day. Precious turned her head, curious about the friendly voice she heard. The baby's big brown eyes locked onto Aquabata, but suddenly Precious's face crumbled into a frown. Without warning, the toddler burst into loud, unhappy wails. Mabel gently bounced Precious on her back, patting her to soothe her. "Ndo, sorry," she whispered to the child. "It's just Auntie Aquabata." Usually, Precious loved seeing people and smiled easily, but for some reason, every time she saw Aquabata lately, she cried as if she were scared. Aquabata's smile faltered. She reached a hand over the fence. "Ah, Precious, meaning Precious, my child. Why are you crying?" she asked in a soft, concerned voice. She wiggled her fingers playfully at the baby. Normally, such a gesture would make a baby giggle, but Precious only cried louder, turning her face away and pressing against her mother's back. "I don't know what is wrong," Mabel apologized, feeling a bit embarrassed. "She's been doing this recently whenever she sees you. Maybe she just woke up in a mood." Mabel tried to laugh it off, but inside she felt uneasy. It was true. Precious had started crying every time Aquabata came near. Mabel couldn't understand why. Aquabata was like a second mother to Precious, always doting on her since she was born. Aquabata withdrew her hand slowly. Her expression had to read for a moment, but then she forced a chuckle. "Ah, maybe she's just hungry or teething. Babies cry for all sorts of reasons. Don't worry, she will outgrow it." Mabel nodded. "Yes, you're probably right. Let me feed her soon." To change the subject, Mabel pointed at the basket of vegetables. "You went to your garden early today. Those ugu leaves look very fresh." "Yes," Aquabata brightened. "I want to cook some onugu bitter leaf soup later today. I will bring some for you to taste when it's ready." "That would be very lovely. Thank you," Mabel said warmly. Sharing meals and ingredients was something the two friends often did. They had been neighbors for 5 years and best friends for almost as long. Their friendship was the kind people admired. They were like sisters. They helped each other with chores, celebrated each other's birthdays, and cared for each other's families. Precious's cries had quieted to soft whimpers now, though she still peeked warily at Aquabata with wet eyes. Mabel excused herself to take Precious inside for breakfast. I will see you later in the day, maybe at the market, she said. Yes, I need to buy some meat for the soup, Aquabata replied. We can go together. Mabel smiled. Perfect. Let me get this little madam fed first. She gently unstrapped Precious from her bag and carried her inside. Inside the small living room, Mabel sat on a woven mat and fed Precious some warm pap, that is corn porridge. The baby eagerly drank, seeming to forget her tears. As Precious ate, Mabel's husband Nizie emerged from the bedroom. He was dressed for work in a neatly ironed shirt and trousers. Good morning, my dear, Nizie greeted, planting a kiss on the top of Mabel's head and then one on Precious's cheek. And how is my little angel this morning? Precious babbled a happy reply, making both her parents laugh. Mabel wiped the porridge from her baby's chin. She's fine now, though she gave me a scare crying so hard when she saw Aquabata. Nizie raised an eyebrow as he sat on a wooden stool. Again? That's odd. Precious used to love Aquabata. I know, Mabel sighed, concern creeping into her voice. Lately, she just cries and cries whenever Aquabata comes near. I feel so bad about it. Aquabata must think we've taught the child to dislike her, which is not true. Babies can be strange, Nizie offered, shrugging. Maybe she's just not used to Aquabata's new hairstyle or something. Aquabata had recently braided her hair in a long twist, decorated with cowries on the ends. The style made her look a bit different, but it was quite beautiful. Maybe, Mabel said doubtfully. She finished feeding Precious and laid her down for a nap. The baby yawned and soon fell asleep, the earlier fussing forgotten for now. Nizie finished his breakfast quickly, a plate of yam and eggs that Mabel had prepared earlier. As he ate, he glanced at his watch. I have to go now or I'll be late to the office. Mabel stood and straightened his collar lovingly. All right, take care, my husband. Don't forget we have the community meeting this evening. Of course, I'll be home before then, he replied. He gave her one more hug and peeked in to look at sleeping Precious with a smile, then hurried out. With her husband off to work and her baby napping, Mabel tidied up the house. She couldn't shake off the worry about Precious crying. It was becoming more frequent and intense each time Aquabata visited. As she washed the dishes, Mabel tried to recall when it all started. Precious had been such a friendly baby, laughing with anyone who played with her. Aquabata had even been there when Precious took her first steps 2 months ago, cheering her on. But in the last few weeks, something changed. Precious would cling to Mabel and scream if Aquabata tried to hold her. There was that afternoon last week when Mabel left Precious with Aquabata for just an hour to help Susan, another neighbor, with a dress fitting. When she returned, she found Precious red-eyed from crying and Aquabata looking frazzled. Aquabata had said the baby refused the food she offered and just kept crying for no reason. At the time, Mabel apologized and thought maybe Precious was just cranky that day, but since then, it seemed to get worse. As Mabel dried the last plate, she heard a soft knock on her door. It was Susan, their neighbor from down the road. Susan was a kindly woman with a gentle face. She often stopped by to chat or share the produce from her farm. Mabel, are you home? Susan called quietly, so as not to wake the baby. Yes, I'm here, come in, Mabel answered, opening the door. Susan stepped in, carrying a bowl covered with a cloth. The delicious aroma of fried plantain filled the air. I brought some fried plantains and granules for you, she said with a smile. I know you like them. Oh, Susan, thank you. You shouldn't have, but I'm glad you did. Mabel laughed, accepting the bowl. She peeked under the cloth, and her mouth watered at the sight of the golden brown plantain slices. This will be a perfect snack for later. You are so kind. Susan waved a hand. It's nothing. How is Precious? I haven't seen her in a few days. She's fine, Mabel said, then added honestly. Well, mostly fine. She's been a bit fussy lately. Just as she said that, a small wail came from the bedroom. Precious had woken up, possibly sensing a new voice in the house. Mabel excused herself to fetch the baby. Soon she returned to the living room with Precious in her arms. The little girl had sleepily rested her head on her mother's shoulder. Upon seeing Susan, Precious eyed her curiously but did not cry. Instead, she reached a tiny hand toward the bowl of plantains. Attracted by the smell, Susan chuckled and tickled the baby's chin. She's grown so much, and she looks healthy. Yes, Mabel agreed, bouncing Precious gently. She's a strong girl. They sat down to talk for a bit. Susan noticed a thoughtful look on Mabel's face. Is something bothering you, my friend? She asked kindly. Mabel hesitated, then decided to share her worry. It's Precious. She cries whenever she sees Aquabata. I don't understand it. They used to be fine together, but now it's so strange. Susan's smile faded slightly. She pursed her lips as if deciding what to say. That is strange. Babies can sometimes see things adults cannot. What do you mean? Mabel asked, adjusting Precious, who was now nibbling on a plantain piece Mabel gave her. I've heard elders say that infants are sensitive, Susan said softly. They can sense a person's spirit, whether it's good or bad. Perhaps Precious senses something off. Mabel frowned. She didn't like what Susan was implying. Aquabata is my best friend. She's a good person. There is nothing bad about her. I'm not saying she's bad though, Susan quickly added, but maybe there is something upsetting Precious that we don't know. It could be a scent she wears or even the jingling of those cowries shells on her hair. Maybe it's frightening the baby. Sometimes it's simple things. Mabel relaxed a bit. That made more sense. Yes, perhaps the cowrie shells in her hair or strong perfume could be the cause. Precious is still small. She could be reacting to those. Susan nodded but still looked a little unconvinced. She changed the subject, not wanting to upset Mabel. They chatted about the upcoming August meeting, a gathering of women in the community, and the weather. After some time, Susan left to continue her morning errands. As noon approached, the sun grew hotter. Mabel decided it was a good time to head to the market before it got too late. She tied Precious securely to her back again, shading the baby's head with a little bonnet, locking up her house as she walked next door to call Aquabata for their planned market trip. Aquabata's house was a small bungalow similar to Mabel's, painted cream with blue window shutters. The front door was open as Mabel knocked on the door frame as she peered in. Aquabata, are you ready for the market? She called out. Inside the house was dim and cool. Mabel smelled something like burning herbs. Perhaps Aquabata had lit incense to freshen the air. There was also an undertone of another scent, something metallic and sharp that Mabel didn't recognize. She stepped into the sitting room, still carrying Precious, who began to stare restlessly. From the back room, Akwabata emerged, tying a wrapper around her waist. "Oh, Mabel, you are here." "Yes, I'm almost ready," she said. Her voice echoed slightly in the quiet house. "Please sit down for a minute." Mabel sat on a wooden chair near the door, fanning herself lightly. Precious woke fully and upon realizing where they were, looked around. When she caught sight of Akwabata approaching, her lower lip trembled. She began whimpering. Akwabata paused and sighed. "She's crying again, isn't she?" Mabel felt apologetic. "I'm sorry. I don't know why she's acting like this." Precious's whimpers were growing louder. Mabel stood up, bouncing her. But the baby turned her face into Mabel's back, little hands gripping her mother's blouse tightly, and started wailing in fear. Akwabata's eyes narrowed just for a second. Then she forced a reassuring smile. "It's okay. Maybe I should keep my distance so she stays calm." Mabel noticed a hot look in her friend's eyes. She felt torn. She wanted to comfort her baby, but she also didn't want her best friend to feel rejected. "No, no, you don't have to stay away. Maybe if you hold her for a minute, she will remember you and stop crying." Without waiting much, Mabel carefully unwrapped Precious from her bag and attempted to hand her to Akwabata. Precious instantly started twisting and crying louder, tiny arms flailing. As soon as Akwabata's hand touched her, the child let out a piercing scream. It was the kind of cry that told Mabel the baby was truly terrified. Surprised by the intensity, Akwabata quickly stepped back and Mabel pulled Precious close again, patting her back. "It's okay, my love. Shh, it's okay. Mama is here." Mabel cooed, heart pounding as she tried to calm her daughter. Precious clung to her mother, burying her face in Mabel's neck and sobbing. It took a couple of minutes for her cries to subside into hiccups. "I'm so sorry, Akwabata," Mabel said breathlessly, rocking Precious. She was upset and confused. "I don't know why she's doing this." Akwabata's face was stormy, but she kept her voice calm. "It's alright. If the child is tired or not feeling well, we can go another time if it's too much trouble now." Mabel shook her head. "No, I still need to go to the market today. I'll just carry her with me." She felt frustrated and a little scared. Precious had never reacted to anyone like this. But something was definitely wrong. She was at loss for what it could be. Akwabata disappeared briefly into her bedroom and returned with a small object in her hand. It was a tiny doll, woven out of palm leaves and cloth, decorated with a few beads. "Here," she said, handing it to Mabel. "I made this little doll for Precious. Perhaps it will comfort her. You can give it to her to play with on the way to the market." The doll was actually quite cute and harmless looking. It had a round little head made from cloth and black thread hair. Mabel managed a smile. "Thank you. She will love it. You're always so thoughtful." Akwabata shrugged and gave a half smile. "Anything for my goddaughter," she said. Yes, Akwabata was Precious's godmother. She had been right there during the baby's church dedication. Remembering that happy time made Mabel feel a wave of guilt for even entertaining any strange thought about her friend. With Precious calmer now and clinging to her mother, the two women headed out to the market road. The dirt path was lined with hibiscus bushes. As they walked, Mabel kept glancing at Precious, who was curiously holding the little palm leaf doll. The baby seemed content for the moment, nibbling on the doll's bead. In the market, the hustle and bustle of vendors and shoppers surrounded them. The air was filled with the calls of women selling tomatoes, peppers, and dried fish, and the smell of ripe fruits and spices. Mabel became busy haggling for a good price on some yam and stockfish, while Akwabata went to the butcher store for meat. For a short while, Precious sat quietly on Mabel's back, distracted by the colorful sights of the market. But as soon as Akwabata returned to her side with her purchases, the baby started to fuse again. She tossed the little doll away and began to cry. Some market women nearby turned to look, concerned that the child might be ill or hungry. Mabel picked up the doll from the dusty ground, dusted it off, and handed it back to Precious, trying to distract her. But the child only cried harder, tiny tears rolling down her cheeks. "I'll carry the basket," Akwabata offered quickly, taking the heavy basket of groceries from Mabel so she could focus on the baby. "Maybe we should head home now." Mabel agreed, feeling flustered. They had bought nearly everything they needed anyway. As they made their way out, one of the older women selling vegetables, Mama Ijele, who everyone called Ijele after the famous giant masquerade because she was large and commanding, called out to Mabel, "Nne, your baby doesn't seem to like the market today." Oh. Mabel forced a smile and answered, "Yes, she's just fussy, Mama Ijele. We are going home now." Mama Ijele looked at Akwabata and back at the crying child, then muttered something under her breath that Mabel couldn't catch. It sounded like a short prayer or proverb, but Mabel was too preoccupied to ask what she said. The walk back home was awkward and silent, except for Precious's soft whims. When they reached their houses, Mabel thanked Akwabata for helping at the market. Akwabata just nodded, looking a bit distant. She handed over the basket to Mabel and said, "I hope she feels better. I'll be in my house if you need anything." Once inside, Mabel put down the basket and immediately removed Precious from her back, holding her close. The baby was still sniffling. She felt a little warm, possibly from the heat outside and all the crying. Mabel gave her some water and laid her down to rest. As Precious dozed off again out of exhaustion, Mabel sighed and sat on her bed, the events of the day swirling in her mind. Precious's reactions to Akwabata was only getting worse. It hurt Mabel to see her daughter so frightened, and it also hurt her that her best friend was upset by it. What could be causing this? Could Susan's offhand suggestion be right, that maybe Precious sensed something? No, that's superstitious nonsense, Mabel said to herself, shaking her head. She refused to believe that anything was wrong with Akwabata. Perhaps Precious was just going through a phase of being afraid of strangers. Though Akwabata wasn't a stranger at all. She remembered reading in a baby care pamphlet that sometimes babies around 1 year old develop fears or stranger anxiety even with familiar people, for reasons no one really understands. Yes, that must be it, she tried to convince herself. That evening, Meze returned home as promised in time for the community meeting. It was a monthly gathering of all the families in their quarter of the village to discuss issues like security, road repairs, and other communal matters. The meeting was held at the village square, a short walk. Mabel left Precious under the care of Mary, her elderly auntie, who lived with them. Auntie Mary was not very mobile, but she loved to sing to the baby and tell her folktales to keep her entertained. Precious was usually comfortable with Auntie Mary. However, as Mabel and Maisie were leaving for the meeting, Precious woke up and began to cry again, reaching out for her mother. "It's okay, my darling," Mabel soothed, feeling guilty to leave her. "Mama will be back soon. Auntie Mary is here with you." Precious, wearing only a nightwear due to the warm night, clung to Mabel's neck. Auntie Mary hobbled over, her walking stick tapping the floor, and gently pried the baby away. "Go on, Mabel," Auntie Mary urged. "The meeting won't last long. I'll manage her." Reluctantly, Mabel left with her husband, listening to Precious's cry fading into the night as Auntie Mary tried to calm her. She had a strange heavy feeling in her chest. Was this just normal separation anxiety, or was there something more? At the meeting, under the bright moon and a few kerosene lanterns, villagers discussed routine issues. Mezier was talking about fixing a pothole on the road, and someone else brought up arranging a communal farming day. Mabel tried to pay attention, but her mind wandered back to Precious and to Aquabata. She looked around the circle of neighbors seated on the wooden benches and plastic chairs. She spotted Aquabata sitting on the opposite side, alone. Aquabata usually sat with Mabel, but tonight, Mabel had been late arriving because of settling Precious. So she ended up next to Mezier, who was with the other men. Aquabata seemed to avoid looking at Mabel, focusing instead on something on the ground. Eventually, the meeting ended with a prayer and everyone went home. As people chatted and walked home, Mabel finally got a chance to catch up to Aquabata, who was leaving quickly. "Aquabata, wait!" she called, rushing a bit to meet her. Aquabata slowed down, but her expression was unreadable in the dim moonlight. "Yes, Mabel." Mabel bit her lip. She wasn't sure exactly what to say. I just wanted to apologize again for Precious's behavior today. I know it must be very upsetting to you." For a split second, something like anger flashed across Aquabata's face, but it was gone as fast as it came. "It's all right," she said in a flat tone. "Like I said, she's just a baby. Maybe she's not used to me anymore." "Not used to you? But she sees you almost every day. She loves you. You know that," Mabel insisted, trying to mend the situation. Aquabata responded with a small sad smile. "I love her too. That's why it hurts that she rejects me now." Mabel felt a tinge of guilt. She gently placed her hand on Aquabata's arms. "Give it time. I'm sure it's just a phase. She'll be running to hug her auntie Aquabata again. You will see." Aquabata nodded slowly, then said, "I hope so." Her eyes glistened as if with tears, but in the faint light it was hard to tell. She then added softly, "Good night, Mabel," and turned to walk to her house. "Good night," Mabel replied, watching her friend's figure retreat into the shadows. Mabel felt a heaviness in her heart. This problem with Precious was not only frightening, it was also straining their beautiful friendship. She resolved to find a solution soon. Maybe she would talk to the doctor in town about it, or the pastor at the church for some prayers, just in case. She didn't want to believe anything was truly wrong, but she also couldn't ignore how unusual this all was. When Mabel and Maisie arrived home, Auntie Mary had finally gotten Precious to sleep by singing old Igbo lullabies. Mabel took the sleeping baby from the old woman's arms and placed her in her crib. Precious looked peaceful now, her long lashes resting on chubby cheeks, an occasional hiccup the only reminder of her earlier crying. Auntie Mary yawned. "She cried for a while, then settled when I gave her that little doll to play with and sang to her too." Mabel glanced at the pan-leaf doll Akwabata had gifted. It was in the crib beside Precious, one of its bead eyes glinting in the dim light. She seems to like that doll, Mabel whispered. Auntie Mary looked at it curiously. Where did you get that doll? It looks handmade. From Akwabata, Mabel answered. She gave it to her today. Auntie Mary's lips pressed together into a thin line. She didn't comment, but continued to stare at the doll for a moment before turning away. Mabel sensed Auntie Mary might have an opinion, so she gently prompted, What is it, Auntie? You have a thought on the doll. Auntie Mary sighed. She was an old village woman with a lot of traditional wisdom. Mabel, my daughter, she began carefully. I am an old woman, and I have seen many things. Sometimes, the hand that gives a gift is not clean. Mabel blinked in surprise. What do you mean by that? The old woman lowered her voice. It may be nothing, but in my day, we were cautious of things like gifts for children, especially if the child reacts badly towards the person. You say Precious cries whenever she sees Akwabata now, and Akwabata gave her the doll today. Mabel's stomach tightened. She respected Auntie greatly, but she didn't want to jump to any conclusions. Yes, Auntie, but Akwabata is my best friend. She would never harm Precious. She loves her. Auntie Mary patted Mabel's shoulder with her wrinkled hand. I know. I hope you are right. But sometimes, jealousy can hide in the hearts of even those we think are close. Just be careful, ma'am. Meaning, be careful, my child. Watch and pray. Don't ignore the signs that something is wrong. Mabel swallowed, her mouth suddenly dry. She couldn't believe what her aunt was hinting at. Jealousy, harm. It seemed impossible. Akwabata had been nothing but wonderful, except for the fact that now Precious feared her. Could there be a reason for a baby to fear her so deeply? She shook her head firmly. I will be careful, Auntie, she said simply, not wanting to argue. Let's all get some rest now. It's late. That night, Mabel struggled to sleep. She lay next to Mezier, listening to the crickets chirp outside and watching the ceiling fan spin lazily. Each time she closed her eyes, she heard Precious's crying echo in her mind. In the cradle, Precious slept quietly, hugging the little doll. Sometime around midnight, Mabel finally drifted off, but her sleep was restless. She dreamed she was walking through a dense forest at night, with only the full moon lighting her path. She could hear a baby crying in the distance, Precious's cry, and she chased the sound, heart pounding. The trees seemed to close in around her, their branches like long arms trying to grab her. In the dream, Mabel emerged into a small clearing, and there stood a figure she recognized as Akwabata, though her friend's face looked pale and strange. Akwabata was holding the crying Precious in her arms. Give me back my baby, Mabel screamed in the dream, rushing towards them. But Akwabata stepped back into the shadows, shaking her head. You left her with me, she said in a low echoing voice that didn't sound like her at all. You trusted me. Then Akwabata turned away, and as she did, she seemed to change shape into a dark winged creature, flying off in the night with Precious's wails trailing behind. Mabel jolted awake with a sharp gasp. She was sweating, and her heart throbbed painfully in her chest. It took her a moment to realize it was just a nightmare. She immediately looked over at the crib. In the faint light from the window, she could see Precious sleeping soundly. the doll still in her little hands. Mabel rubbed her face and sat up, reaching inside the crib gently stroked Precious's back. The baby sighed but stayed asleep. The nightmare had felt so real. It sent chills over Mabel's skin. "It's just stress," she whispered to herself. The events of the day had clearly gotten to her, and her mind was playing tricks. She glanced at the clock by the bed. It was 3 o'clock a.m. Lizzie was still asleep beside her, softly snoring. All was quiet. Too awake now to fall back asleep immediately, Mabel decided to get a drink of water. She slipped out of bed carefully and tiptoed to the kitchen. As she passed by the small living room, something caught her eye through the window. She paused. There was a faint glow outside, by the fence that separated her house from Akwabatar's. At first, she thought it might be a firefly or perhaps someone walking with a torch, but the glow was steady and low near the ground. Curious and a bit nervous, Mabel moved closer to the window, lifting the curtain slightly. She peeked into the darkness of the night. At first, she saw nothing but the vague shapes of the bushes and the silhouette of Akwabatar's house. But then, there it was again, a dim light flickering along the ground near the fence. It looked like a small flame. Mabel squinted. To her astonishment, she saw Akwabatar herself crouching there in the yard near the boundary between their houses. Akwabatar had a lantern or candle set on the ground beside her and seemed to be digging or burying something in the soil next to the hibiscus bushes that lined the fence. Mabel's heart jumped to her throat. What was Akwabatar doing out there in the middle of the night? Why would she be digging near their shared fence line? A dozen thoughts raced through her mind. She watched in silence, barely breathing. Akwabatar was muttering something. It sounded like a chant or prayer, but not one Mabel recognized. It wasn't a Christian prayer from church. It sounded more like hushed incantations in the still night. Mabel could make out a few words in Igbo. "Ike niile dị n'aka m," meaning all power is in my hands, and "Gala n'ụra," meaning we go to sleep. The rest was too quiet or too fast for her to understand. Mabel's hands trembled as she clutched the curtain. She felt a wave of fear. Why would Akwabatar be chanting and digging near her house at such an hour? Finally, she saw her friend place an object into the small hole she dug. It looked like a bundle of some sort, wrapped in cloth. Akwabatar covered it back up with soil and patted it down. Then she picked up her lantern and stood up. Mabel quickly ducked down behind the window, still afraid of being seen. Through a tiny gap, she continued to watch as Akwabatar, holding the lantern, turned and walked silently back into her house. The light disappeared, and all was dark again. For a long time, Mabel stayed crouched by the window, her heart thudding. She didn't dare go outside immediately. She wondered if she should wake Meze or Auntie Mary. What she saw was deeply disturbing. Could Akwabatar have been burying something like a charm by their fence? The thought made Mabel shiver. After what felt like forever, when she was sure Akwabatar had come back to sleep, Mabel quietly slipped out from the front door into her yard. The night air was warm and still. She moved barefoot to the spot by the hibiscus bushes where she saw the activity. Using the light from her phone screen as a torch, she knelt down. The earth looked freshly disturbed. With trembling fingers, Mabel dug at the soft soil. A few inches down, Her nails scraped against cloth, her heart pounding even harder. Mabel carefully pulled out the buried object. It was indeed a small bundle wrapped in black cloth tied with a red thread. She hesitated, fear telling her not to open it, but she had to know. Hands shaking, she untied the red thread and unwrapped the black fabric. Inside, she found something that made her blood run cold. There was a small wooden carving, roughly in the shape of a person, like a crude doll, but it had a tiny baby sock tied around its middle. A sock that looked exactly like one of Precious's infant socks that had gone missing a few days ago. The doll carving also had a nail driven into its head and some kind of dark stain on it that looked like dried blood. Additionally, there were a few leaves and a chicken feather wrapped together with it. Mabel felt the world tilt. She nearly dropped the bundle as horror washed over her. This looked like some kind of juju or witchcraft charm, and it was directed at her baby. Why else would Precious's socks be on it? Her breath came in fast. Panicked gasped. Why would Aquabata, her best friend, bury something so sinister right beside Mabel's house? The truth that Mabel had been denying was now too clear to ignore. Something was very, very wrong with Aquabata. Tears filled Mabel's eyes as she clutched the evil bundle. All the little signs she had ignored now overwhelmed her. Precious's fear, Auntie Mary's warnings, Susan's cautious words, the strange smell in Aquabata's house, and now this midnight ritual. Her best friend, the one she called sister, had betrayed her in the darkest way possible. Mabel wrapped the items back in the clothes hurriedly and reburied the bundle exactly as it was, in case Aquabata checked. She took only one thing with her, the tiny baby sock. She hid it in the pocket of her nightgown. Then she crept back into her house, locking the door behind her firmly. Leaning against the door, tears streaming down her face, Mabel felt a swell of emotions: shock, hurt, confusion, and fear. She realized she had to protect her child. Whatever Aquabata was doing, it was meant to harm Precious. It had to be given what she found. But why? What did this mean? Jealousy. Auntie Mary had said, could Aquabata be jealous of her having a baby? Mabel knew Aquabata had been trying to have a child of her own for years without success, and her husband had died in a tragic accident the year before, leaving her all alone. Mabel had comforted her through those hard times. She never imagined Aquabata would ever want to hurt her or her baby out of envy or pain. Back in her bedroom, Mabel checked on Precious, who was still peacefully asleep. Fresh tears came as she watched her innocent baby breathe softly. How could anyone wish harm upon this sweet child? Mabel knew she had to be very careful now. She wiped her tears, steeling herself. She quietly woke her husband, gently shaking his shoulder. Monsieur, she whispered urgently. Monsieur, please wake up. Monsieur groggily opened his eyes. Confused. What is it? Are you okay? Mabel took a shaky breath. I need to tell you something. Something is very wrong. It's about Aquabata. At the mention of their neighbor's name, Monsieur sat up, rubbing his eyes. Under the moonlight from the window, he could see the distress on Mabel's face. He became alert. What happened, Nkem? Keeping her voice low, so as not to wake Auntie Mary or Precious, Mabel recounted everything she had seen just minutes ago. How Aquabata was out burying something by the fence and what Mabel had dug up. Maisie listened in astonishment, eyes widening. When Mabel showed him the tiny sock she recovered, he recognized it as precious. A deep frown crossed his face. This is serious, he muttered. Are you absolutely sure it was Aquabata you saw outside? I'm certain, Mabel whispered. I saw her clearly with the lantern. I heard her voice. I know what I saw, Maisie. Maisie clenched his fist. He was a calm man by nature, but now anger and worry flashed in his eyes. We cannot let this go. If she's truly doing witchcraft against our child. He didn't finish the sentence. The thought was too terrible. Mabel put a hand on his arm. What do we do? If we confront her, she might deny it or do something worse. I'm even afraid to let her know I found out. Maisie took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, trying to remain level-headed. First, we must protect Precious. We should not leave her alone or with anyone except family we trust. Second, perhaps we should get help, maybe from the pastor or even the village head. This kind of thing, I never imagined dealing with such, but we might need both spiritual and community help. Mabel nodded, wiping a stray tear. She recalled that Pastor Emmanuel at their church had a reputation for strong prayers and dealing with dark forces. As some said, but part of her hesitated at making it public. Aquabata was loved by many. It would be shocking and scandalous to accuse her of such evil. What if people didn't believe them? They had evidence though, at least the charm bundle, but confronting her directly, risking angering her further. We have to be cautious, Mabel said. Let's think this through by morning. For now, I just want to keep an eye on Precious and make sure nothing happens tonight. Maisie agreed. He insisted that they pray together. Right then and there, kneeling on the cool floor beside their bed, they quietly prayed, asking God for protection over their family and for guidance and strength to face whatever lay ahead. Mabel felt a bit calmer after the prayer, though still deeply hurt and frightened by the betrayal. Maisie fetched his Bible and placed it open near Precious's crib, a symbolic gesture to ward off evil. They both kept watch for a while, peering out of the window occasionally to ensure Aquabata did not return. The rest of the night passed on eventually, though neither of them slept much. Dawn broke with a soft glow, but in Mabel's heart, a storm was raging. As the first cock crow faded and people in the village began their morning routines, Mabel sat on her bed holding Precious. The baby played with a strand of her mother's hair, unaware of the turmoil around her. Maisie was up too, pacing the small bedroom quietly as not to alarm Auntie Mary in the next room. They had decided not to tell Auntie Mary everything until they had a plan. The elderly woman knew something was wrong, but she simply prayed from her room, trusting Mabel and Maisie to handle it. Mabel had never felt so conflicted in her life. Aquabata, her dearest friend, almost a sister, had betrayed her trust in the worst way. Every time she pictured the tiny sock tied around that crude doll, her stomach knotted with anger and pain, and yet she also felt a deep sadness. She remembered all the laughter and good times with Aquabata, how they would cook together, shared dreams and secrets. How could jealousy turn such a friend into someone who would harm a little child? Precious yawned and rested her head on Mabel's chest. The child was calm this morning, thank goodness, but Mabel knew she had to act fast before anything else could happen. She kissed the top of Precious's head, her resolve hardening. First thing, they needed guidance and help from someone wise. Maisie, Mabel said softly as she got up and placed Precious on her back, securing her with a wrapper. I think we should go see Pastor Emmanuel at the church this morning before Akwabata suspects anything. Lizzie nodded. I was thinking the same. He will know what to do, and he can pray with us for protection. We also might need witnesses or counsel from the elders. I agree, Mabel replied. She took a deep breath. We will have to act normal around Akwabata until we are ready to confront her. I don't want her to know we found out. If she senses it, she might do something unpredictable. Exactly. So we won't say anything to her for now, Mezier said firmly. Just then, they heard a familiar voice calling from outside the front door. Mabel! Mabel! Are you home? It was Akwabata.